My name is Datsunami.
And I'm Selena. This is a bi-monthly podcast where we discuss the various aspects of sex work, from the sensual to the political.
So, welcome to Pay for Play.
Hello, everyone. So, today we are going to talk about a recent lawsuit taken against Twitter by the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, or NCOS for short. This is a federal lawsuit that ultimately, the issue at hand is Twitter didn't ban child porn
quick enough.
So,
And
go ahead.
Yeah, so basically the goal of this lawsuit so far is to force Twitter to preemptively ban any adult content creators, just to go ahead and get rid of the entire problem of any sexual things anywhere in the public discourse.
So if you want to know why that's the ultimate goal of this, we have to understand what NCOS is, because if you just read the complaint, they just want better enforcement and damages and stuff like that. To get the broader context, you kind of need to know more.
Yeah, so we'll start by breaking down kind of in general what happened. This lawsuit was filed on the basis of an unnamed minor because they had their photos unconsensually uploaded to Twitter and was unable to get them removed either fast enough or at all. That part I am unsure about the detail.
So I've read the complaint. There was several parts of this. The first part is there was a report done via Twitter, or via Twitter's reporting thing about these. The complaint was never followed up on, basically. So that sounds bad. Then, I believe it was 1 or 2 years later, I don't have the exact number up in front of me, another complaint was made about these same images from a very specific account, which we will not name, nor will we name the one that was made afterwards, because we don't want you going there, but still.
We don't dox on this channel.
Well, that, and I don't want to give Twitter handles of places where child porn might be.
Oh, yes. No.
Yeah, that too. So the user reported this, said, "Hey, this is me." And
nothing happened.
So Twitter was like, "We need you to send some photo evidence. This is you." Did that, heard nothing, made another complaint. After some investigation, Twitter found that it was not in violation of terms of service. As a trans woman, I can tell you I find that bullshit excuse constantly. So I know what happened here.
Of course, we all know how unnoticed reports go on Twitter a lot.
So
this is definitely a problem that does need to be addressed.
Yep. So it wasn't.
And then
Well, it wasn't until the government got involved and did Twitter actually ban the user. They didn't IP ban them; they just banned them, and that user that they banned is now currently, at least at the time of filing this case, was currently using a different handle to do the exact same thing that they were. So,
which is catfishing minors on Snapchat and then posting them to Twitter, which is also part of the complaint of the lawsuit, as it originated on Snapchat. But of course, we have no pressure on Snapchat right now, just on Twitter, the biggest marketplace for sexual workers.
So I want to stress, what happened to the kid? Horrible. And yeah, like, there should be some consequence. I don't think that's a controversial take.
No one here is saying, yes, we should let people post pictures of just anybody, whether they know about it or not, or consent to it or not. And there's so much more that I think every sex worker agrees that Twitter as a platform could do when it comes to reports on harassment or unconsensual photos.
Yeah. And the group, Incos, they're very anti-sex. They use the auspices of protecting children to get rid of, basically, they just want to get rid of all porn.
And some people may say, well, I mean, don't you think it's good that we're focusing on the children? But we can talk about how NCOs actually started. When they were founded in 1962, they were actually first called Morality and Media, and their main focus during this time was actually work against obscenity, which is very vague, but actually what they said on their website at the time: sex shops, sex toys, decriminalization of sex work, and comprehensive sex education. And then also working to ban various works of literature and visual arts organizations that they personally deemed obscene. And this can probably be influenced by their explicitly Catholic and right-wing views that they were pretty open about at the time, though now they like to refer to themselves as nonpartisan.
Of course, well,
but
everyone's
I cannot
nonpartisan.
imagine. I can't imagine that they could stay nonpartisan while also keeping all of the funding from their large religious lobbyists that they had since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And haven't gotten rid of since becoming non-sectarian.
So basically, their anti-sexual expression, they are Puritans. They are like, they use. I want to compare it to this. When people in the 90s and the early 2000s, and before then, but I'm only old enough to remember the 90s, when they were railing against gay marriage and just queer folk in general, what was the excuse? Think of the children. This is their think of the children. They're using children as an excuse to ban broader consensual activity. And
oh, well, it's always easy to weaponize people who can't speak for themselves.
Well, yeah. I mean, transphobes do it with me now. It's think of the children. When it's the same arguments all the time. It's always
it's
used
what if
against...
a guy walks into a bathroom, or what if somebody posts a picture on Twitter? It's always going to be the same thing.
Yeah, it's always the same arguments. It's always against minorities. And
there's never anything that they propose to help both sides. It is always, how can we absolutely demolish this from existing in public discourse, as they say. They literally state, how can we legally deem sex work indecent in public discourse, as one of the goals for their main lawsuit.
And for the record...
That's all they're looking for.
Yeah, and
is another excuse.
For the record, INCOS has targeted, like, LGBTQ material before. So it's not just sex work. It's, like, anything that is not, like, their very specific definition of what is right and moral in the world. And of course, sex workers, gay people. I haven't seen anything on trans people, but I guarantee trans and non-binary folk. Yeah, like they want to limit or get rid of us.
And I think it's most shown in how the lawsuit is directly addressing only Twitter. When this entire incident started on, and is apparently still going on Snapchat, where it originated, and I think that's mostly because you can see just how many people use Twitter as a main way to market their sex work, and it just seems like a more opportune thing for them to do at the time. They're not concerned about kids being manipulated on social media, period. They are worried about where are sex workers most prevalent right now, and how can we use these kids to most easily stomp them out?
Yeah, the lawsuit itself actually relies on one of the reasons Tumblr is just... Who the fuck uses Tumblr anymore?
No one.
Yeah. So the lawsuit relies on something called Sesta Fosta. And it was passed in 2018. And because of poor wording and overly broad definition of section of 47 U.S. Code Section 230, the protections for private blocking and screening of offensive material, basically that is the shield that a lot of like Twitter or Tumblr or any of these websites use, so they aren't liable for things put on their servers and on their platforms by the users. It kind of allows freedom of speech. It allows freedom of expression. Getting rid of it is a horrific thing if you want freedom of speech. It also allows those users to ban, or those platforms to ban users that are breaking TOS without fear of like lawsuits and stuff. And you still get lawsuits, but most of the time they have protections. What the what Sesta Fosta did was it broadened it, and specifically the language
with very vague terminology.
Yeah.
By the way, which I think is part of the goal of this lawsuit. Also, is to see how far they can really push this wording to their advantage.
So the wording specifically, I'm reading directly from the act that from Sesta Fosta. Conspires or attempts to do so with the intent to promote or facilitate the prostitution of another person shall be fined under this title. The problem is, conspires or attempts to facilitate prostitution. That is so vague, so broad. And yes, there are words around it, and yes, there is a deeper reading that can be made, but it needs to be narrowed by case law. And this is that case law that is testing the limits.
And so we have to see how this one turns out, and hopefully it ends up siding on our First Amendment and not our 13th, which apparently these people think that this falls within violating our 13th Amendment because they believe that sex work is slavery, period. So they are also challenging it through that view.
Yeah, they are largely, they're conflating sex work in general, like all forms of sex work, with sex trafficking. Because sex trafficking could, under some circumstances, be considered a form of slavery. And I wouldn't disagree. The problem
no one would disagree with that.
The problem is they want to conflate it, and they want to
apply to the entire sexual industry.
Correct. Kind of like the last time we talked. There's always a conflation of whatever you have a problem with the entire industry.
Well, because if you just focus on the industry, you have to boil down your positions to usually a moral argument of it's icky, and no one wants to do that because that's not how public discourse works these days.
Oh no!
People do actually need a little more information,
yeah.
a little more factual basis.
It's icky. Get it off my timeline.
I mean, you can even show how icky they think it is with their first action lawsuits against places like just sex shops. Imagine someone sells a dildo and you scream, "The children."
I used to live in Chicago. When I was walking to my girlfriend at the time, there was a sex shop right on the corner. Like, I lived in the gay part of town. There were sex shops everywhere. There was one specific sex shop that I absolutely loved because I passed by every day. It was in the middle of a residential neighborhood almost. As residential as you can get in downtown Chicago. Butt plugs, dildos, and fucking tails right in the window. It was beautiful. I loved it. But think of the children.
Surely this is the peak of society. But no, for real. Yes, it's always never about what's actually wrong with it or if it really is violating people's free speech to get rid of sex work. It's just we have to think about the most important group, which is the children. And obviously, which I don't see why they think that sex workers would not care about the children as much as anybody else just because they do sex as a job. I think sex workers, if anybody, would be the most concerned about sex trafficking because as Swerfs say all the time, we are the most affected by sex trafficking. Like, people, it's just what happens. I don't see why they would think that all of a sudden because we are adults that are doing it, we're like, oh, I don't care if it happens to a kid. Yeah, I don't understand why they think all of a sudden us being so involved in such an important issue would be like, we'll brush it off for the kids.
Well, I can answer
Like-
that. It's actually because as sex workers, we're immoral, and we are immoral, unpure, and evil. Therefore,
I mean, they probably think we're after the kids. If I'm honest.
I mean, again, trans woman, I hear the fucking, like, you're a pedo thing just thrown out, like, 6 times a day.
But seriously, though, I just hate that people think that our needs are, like, completely in opposition or something. Like, things that you could do to help children have less access to adult content online would help both adults and children.
Yeah.
I don't understand how, because we could do things so easily, like if we made 18 plus accounts an actual thing on Twitter where you cannot follow unless you've verified that you're above 18.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty simple fix to the issue right there. And that's just like one thing that I came up off the top of my head.
Yeah, but you know what so the reason that this lawsuit aims to get rid of all porn on Twitter, essentially, is because you figured out a quick solution, but you know what the ultimate problem will be, or the ultimate solution that they use if they
banning
lose this?
minorities?
They're just going to ban porn. They're going to ban not safe for work, because the wording of this law was so vague that it's not worth the chance of lawsuit, and it's not worth going through and trying to find out every legal scenario where you could get sued and accounting for it. It is easier just to blanket ban not safe for work.
And it's sad that might actually happen.
Yeah, when Sesta Fosta was first enacted, remember, Tumblr was a huge part for porn. They banned...
And not even just regular porn, art, too.
Yeah,
like
so...
erotic art.
Yeah, like, this didn't affect just, like people who, like, produce porn that we would think of, like, you know, naked photos of yourself, or you having sex with someone, or whatever your particular flavor of porn was. This also affected, like, not safe for work artists. My girlfriend was recently affected by Pornhub just getting all, like, anything that wasn't verified and just shutting it out. It completely decimated the community that she made some money off of by doing art and posting it. In response to this law, Tumblr, all porn, gone, because we don't want to deal with website. Craigslist used to have a personals section, and a lot of sex workers, like, it was a pretty open secret. Like, if you wanted to find a prostitute, you went to Craigslist personals. You could find one. Not everyone was. Some were actually just looking for hookups. But it was also a bunch of, like, prostitutes. There's also a lot of, like, cops trying to act like prostitutes in order to either attract customers who would be soliciting prostitutes, or attempting to solicit the prostitutes in order to arrest them. So, you know, a mixed bag there. But... So,
I mean, it just seems like everything that we could do that would help the sex workers would also help the kids. I just don't understand, other than wanting to streamline the process of getting rid of things you don't like, just completely steamrolling over freedom of speech and probably several other rights that we have to do work. Obviously, we can get into the whole debate of how we think prostitution should be decriminalized and stuff. So I just think all of this is a very nasty little backhand to summarize it very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's perfect summary. And the problem is, if this happens and Twitter ends up banning not safe for work stuff, it's not like Twitter is gonna lose billions of dollars immediately. Like, that's just, it happens to every company that does that type of thing. But it may end up not being, like, in the long run, Twitter may die, or Twitter may just not care, and they'll recoup that money somewhere other way. It's not really gonna affect Twitter.
No.
What it's gonna affect is
everyday people trying to make a living during a pandemic.
And it's minorities mostly. It is.
But they care about the kids more than minorities.
Yeah.
I mean, after the further they manage to get with this, the more they're going to be able to revert back to when they were first founded and start taking more active stances against minorities and the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, it is minority.
It's not just limited to sex workers.
Yeah, it is.
This is where they start.
It is minority communities. It is people in Black and Hispanic communities, largely, that do a lot of sex work and rely on it to live. It is queer folk, especially queer folk who, they don't have a fallback. Like, for me, I am not in this category. If sex work doesn't pan out for me, I have other means of making money. Like, this is not going to affect me, outside of banning me from doing something that I enjoy. But for a lot of, queer folk, they don't have their parents to go back to. They don't have a stable job to go back to. They don't have a safety net of any type. They're barely making ends meet on the work that they do now. And because they've done sex work, if future employers find out because of the way we treat sex work, they're going to have trouble getting jobs. So if Twitter were to blanket ban not safe for work stuff because of a lawsuit, even if it's not like this one, even one similar to this, the people who are going to get hurt, there's real consequences for minorities and queer folk who rely on sex work to make ends meet, to live under the system that we have. And ultimately, that's also going to increase the rate of in-person, prostitution, which is already illegal.
Which increases sex trafficking way more than posting a nude on Twitter does.
And sexual assault, and abuse, and
murder.
Exploitation.
In the end, obviously.
And it makes it harder.
That's all it leads to.
It also makes it harder to catch the people doing the child sex trafficking, because you have less avenues to catch them.
Yeah, you really are just giving yourself less options. If someone's only doing it in person, whereas you can track lots of things on the internet, which I think would also help with, or would also be helped by enacting things that would help sex workers and minors. I mean, it can all be done together, and the thing is, people are like, it's just too much work for something I already don't like. But they fail to consider the thing they don't like is people's freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And livelihoods at some points.
So, I know we want to talk about the Pornhub ban at some point, but I do want to reference it here. Pornhub had a very simple solution and a very bad solution when they got hit with a similar thing. They could either verify stuff, they could have they could go through and make sure everyone's verified and kind of review all content, and it'd be a long process, but it would be a better solution. Or they just nuke everything, and only people with 100% verified already accounts get to keep their stuff. There's no review, there's no nothing. You're just gone if you aren't verified.
And not even to mention how little Pornhub has done in its entire existence to stop anything to do with child porn until now,
Pornhub
which I
is
find
fucking trash.
Really gross. Pornhub is gross. I mean, because good for them that they're finally doing something, air quotes and all. But number one, should have been doing things before now. You wouldn't have had to do what you just did, go nuclear, if you just had been doing good in the first place. There are plenty of really good, adult industry websites that, to even begin, you just have to be verified. That cuts out the whole, oh, you created an account not the exact way I wanted to, I'm going to nuke thousands of you. There's plenty of ways you can do this that's right. Imagine if we did verification on Twitter. You don't have to be 18, but they have some confirmation of who you are.
Yeah, you'd have to.
And then you can't make several different accounts because you have to verify yourself all the time. So that would help with if someone gets reported for something really bad like harassment, they can't just make another account and do it again.
So,
like the person in this exact case.
Yeah, exactly. So, you and I both I use OnlyFans now because I'm horrible at actually uploading new content. So, I said, it's
the hardest part.
I'm still getting into sex work and it's still a thing for me, but you use OnlyFans and MiniVids. Both of those, I had to not only submit my driver's license, which I hated, by the way, because it's not switched over to my actual name yet. So yay, dead naming myself. But I also had to fill out tax forms.
Oh yeah, we have our W-2s all up. They even help you fill out your taxes. There is so much you can do to make these things good. Do you know how much child porn there probably is on MiniVids? Probably less than 0.03%, because of course there's always a chance.
Yeah, there's always a chance,
but holy crap, that's really good. And Twitter could be doing so much more, but they're lazy because they have no responsibility to anybody since they're a private company, which I get. We just were so happy that Trump got banned, but this is a completely different thing than being banned off Twitter. Just being banned off Twitter, this is an organization that has been basically hunting down sex workers' rights for decades.
Yeah.
And this is just one thing after another. If we lose Twitter, we lose basically everything else.
So
at this point.
Yeah, I want to point out there's a difference between banning someone for breaking your terms of service because they're pushing conspiracy theories and inciting violence and trying to overthrow democracy. They still Trump still has a platform, still could get out and go make public statements.
Still has a job.
Yeah, there's not a material harm. In fact, there's a material benefit getting rid of that type of thing. And incitement, which is what he was banned off of Twitter for. Incitement is not protected under the Constitution. Trust me, I'm very good at constitutional law. Incitement, one of those things that the First Amendment does not protect. It's one of the few exceptions. Sex work, that doesn't fall under obscenity, unfortunately, because obscenity is extraordinarily narrow.
Yeah, I'm assuming that legally, when you say obscenity, it is extremely specific.
I will get into
in what applies.
I will let you know what the law for obscenity is later. just after the show, I will let you know that one because it's hilarious to me. But banning sex work, banning not safe for work material. It's not just prostitutes. It's people just posting videos, people doing fetish art, people doing not safe for work art. It's not even just sex workers. It's depending on your definition of sex worker, it's artists who are just, oh God, I drew a character with nipples. That is not safe for work. And if that's banned, that's harming not just sex workers, artists, basically anything. Technically you could extend this to movie clips or something. Now, I don't think they'll go that far, but I know for a fact artists would be hurt.
Yeah, and the thing that makes this so hard is it's just really hard to debate this because once you bring in, again, child sex trafficking, making it the main point of your entire argument, as you can see how SESTA passed, there was only 2 and 25 people, both in the House and the Senate, that said nay.
Yeah.
So that it's a very... If you're one of those people who said no, people think that you're a sex trafficker yourself, basically.
Yeah,
so
that's...
it's a very hard conversation to have because everyone is... It's it's a much easier conversation to say, sorry, sex workers, you just can't have a job, than to say, sorry, sometimes some kids may get hurt. I don't know what to say. Because that's going to happen either way.
Yeah, as much as we make fun of think of the children, it's actually a very useful tactic. Because if you say no to something like Sesta Fosta, everyone's going to paint you as someone who is for sex trafficking, even if
this stuff doesn't directly help sex trafficked victims at all.
Yeah, it's...
At all.
And that's really the problem that that's the ultimate problem that I think sex workers and like queer folk specifically have when fighting for some type of legal recognition or legal rights or just some type of equality. It's always, but you're a bad influence on children, because children are an amazing tool to use if the only argument you have is moral grandstanding. But unfortunately, that moral grandstanding does material harm to people who rely on sex work to survive. So,
yeah. I just think if we ever are discussing anything that involves people's rights, we should be thinking a little bit harder than this.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, we both agree, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find some sex worker who doesn't agree with this, that no, children should not be involved in the sex trade. Children should be protected in some way. But to do that, you shouldn't ban all porn. You can find other ways around it.
It's just not solving the deeper issue of all this. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an infection. You didn't clean anything out. It's still just going to happen. You're just not going to have to see it. You don't have to look at it, and so that makes you feel better.
I would argue it's like adding active bacteria to the infection and then putting a Band-Aid over it. Because you're doing material harm.
Yeah, really. Especially to victims of sex trafficking.
Yeah. So, any final words on this one?
I think we hit it all.
Okay. I do have one. Fuck INCOS and fuck child sex trafficking. Don't do it. Like, fight against it, but also protect sex workers.
True. Can do both.
So, we love you all, and we will talk to you later.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Pay for Play.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us, please give us a follow and share us around. You can follow us on Twitter at pay_for_play, where you can find more information on the topics that we talk about and links to our resources.
We appreciate each and every listener. Until next time.